Namaskara and welcome to BIC Talks, a podcast brought to you by Bangalore International Centre, where we present conversations that move, inform, and encourage discourse.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. It gives me really great pleasure to speak for just a few minutes to introduce this marvelous book called Resilience Decoded by my dear friend, Dr. Sujata Shetty. And just to say that it's a very timely book because a very few books written, it's really a how-to book on parenting teenagers, which is the most difficult part of anybody's parenting journey. And the testimony to hers is two very, very tall, young, gorgeous men who are sitting somewhere here. Don't sit behind them, you won't be able to see the stage. But she and her husband have done a marvelous job. I watched them through these years, and so she writes with personal experience, with the kind of research that she brings to anything that she does, and extreme compassion and empathy. So congratulations, Sujata. Let's hear it for her.
Thank you, Rohini. Thank you so much.
So very, very quickly, because she asked me to speak for very few minutes, so somebody can stop me when I go on too long. But very quickly, I remember not being a teenager. I'm 66 now, but I still remember being 13, nervous, overconfident, everything at the same time. And how I don't think our parents were very much aware of what was going on in our lives. I don't think they quite knew which class I was studying in. They were very great parents, but we really experienced benign neglect. And I must say, we got to adventure a lot because of that. So long as we were safe and showed up, for some reason at 8 p.m., I had to come back home. Otherwise, they would all get very angry. At 8:02, they started to show signs of nervousness. But other than that, I think we really had a fantastic teenage when I look back. Then, as a mother of teenagers, I must say what I did was I outsourced a bit of my teenage parenting to Valley School, which is a fabulous system of teaching children without fear, without punishment, and without reward. And so the children sort of just grew up without Nandan and me doing far too much. But of course, there were moments. And I remember once when my son was being particularly exasperating to me at any rate. And I said, Nihar, I'm really trying. Quick came the reply, yes, Mama, you are very trying. So these are the kind of miscommunications and communications that happen in the teenage years. But I'll tell you, I'm a grandmother now of a 8-year-old who will soon be a teenager. And we're all very, like fingers, nose, toes, eyes, everything is crossed that it will go well. Because, and this is my last point, that today's teens have to deal with what none of us had to deal before. And we'll discuss it more, but that's what she brings out so well. In this day of social media, in this day of having a phone companion in your hand 24 hours a day, life is really, really more challenging. But this is the generation that is going to take us into the new, brave world that is awaiting. So there could not have been a better time for this. These conversations have to really be deepened. And I'm taking this opportunity to plug the National Mental Health Festival that we support together with NCBS and NIMHANS. It's on November 8th and 9th. We are going to discuss a lot about teenage mental health, intimacy, men aging, and lots of things that concern all of you in this audience. So do please come to the Lalita show on 8th and 9th. Sujata is also going to be there for a panel. And with that, I'll close. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Rohini. It was a delightful opening.
Thank you so much for choosing to spend this evening with us. It is a very special evening. And Sujata, thank you for your beautiful, brilliant, and important book. Rohini, as always, for your support, your wisdom, and your presence. So I'm going to start out by reading a quote from the book that really resonated with me. Resilience is not the absence of suffering, but the art of transforming pain into wisdom without letting it steal your softness. And this moved me because so often resilience is mistaken for hardness, for putting on armor and refusing to bend. But here was a reminder that true resilience is tender, that it is about holding on to our humanity even when life asks us to endure more than we think that we can, And you have given us not just research or philosophy, but a way of being, a way that allows us to honor our struggles without losing the gentleness that makes us human. And that is really the heart of this book, an invitation to see resilience not as survival alone, but as survival with grace, with softness intact. So Sujata, you wear so many hats as scientist and author and life coach and mother and friend. When you look back, what was your first intimate encounter with resilience? Was there a moment in your life where it revealed itself as a force that altered your journey?
To get to your question, Pavi, I think my first encounter with resilience would have to be in graduate school. 80% of experiments in molecular biology fail. And as a science nerd who had done fairly well in school till then, that was a bitter pill to swallow. That combined with the fact that graduate school has its inherent stresses and strains, and that lab work is isolating by definition, I had my first encounter with a fairly long period of stress and mild anxiety and depression. It cleared as I learned how to handle the failures. And once I got my PhD and got the postdoc of my dreams at the NIH, I knew that I was all right and things were good to go, right? But then the second intimate encounter, I think, came later as a new mother while navigating a transcontinental move. So I had moved from DC to Delhi to Bombay to Bangalore, and I had a new baby in less than 3 years. And that was a lot. But that encounter taught me the importance of relationships because stress is a stunning architect. It's a cunning architect. It builds labyrinths in your mind when you don't have social connections. And I could lean into compassionate friendships. I could lean into having steady habits like banishing gluten from my diet, for example, help to get rid of migraines, and building on seeking a purposeful life. And I think that helped me undergo training in resilience. And then you realize as you go through your life, right? I think by the time you're in midlife like I am, you realize that resilience is not about avoiding the storms. It's not about avoiding the storms. It's about learning to dance in the rain. And that's sort of what we want to teach our children.
That's beautifully put. And staying with that thought, those early reckonings of stress and struggle to now distilling resilience into a full book. Can you sort of trace that arc? What deepened, what fell away, and what emerged finally as the true calling behind this work?
Yeah, so this book is written through the triple lens of being a scientist, a journalist, a health journalist, and a mother. And as a scientist, at the NIH, I learned how stress tinkers with immunity. As a columnist, I was working on how complex science could be distilled into actionable wellness advice. But it was as a mother of two boys, two amazing boys who were, one entering his teenage years, just as a pandemic hit, and seeing their worlds shrink to screens that really crystallized my mission. So this book is an amalgam of long conversations with doctors, with teachers, with students. I think that was the most important part, talking to the teenagers and to mothers. And then my own experience as a recovering helicopter parent that brought the book to life.
Rohini, you briefly talked about your teenage years. So if you were to look back, do you think that there were moments or experiences that were quietly shaping your understanding of resilience at that time?
I always think now when I look back, I have to look really back because I told you how old I am. But, I think our environment shapes us a lot. My family, of course, did. The fact that we were, I tell you, the environment of safety. I grew up in Mumbai, and now I realize how safe Mumbai was. We were middle class family. We lived in buildings. Whenever my father changed jobs or had promotions, we moved. But we moved in a similar area, and there were these large buildings with lots of people, lots of children. We would all be downstairs. We would go up only for dinner. We learned from each other all the time. I think we were able to walk out, go by buses, sometimes together. We would come back at 11 p.m. at night. Somehow I feel that growing up with friends and in a safe public social environment made a big difference to how our teenage years went. And those were times when actually there was a lot of political turmoil in the country as well, because this was 1975. The emergency taught us a lot. We were political in our thinking, and I mean it in the best possible way, that we were engaged still in the national project that was India. And sometimes I think later on people became more concerned about their own goals. You should talk about that. Is there a difference between teenagers being very much focused on their personal lives, their personal goals, and is that good or bad? Maybe I'll throw it back to you because you've done more research on this.
Yeah, I think having goals is very important.
Yes.
Having goals that you seek to achieve is very important. But then having a goals that have a larger that don't just involve your personal ambition, but a larger picture in mind, I think is critical. It's that element of purpose.
Yeah.
Is that element of not thinking about yourself and thinking
Yeah.
more altruistically. I think that can really serve to build your resilience, certainly long term.
Yeah. Sometimes I worry, is the teenage self shrinking? Like, are we thinking more? Are we not letting, or is there not enough space for youngsters to be their largest selves on the largest possible canvas, even though they can connect with anybody in the world in 1 second?
Yeah.
So that's something I sometimes worry about.
Yeah, no, I think you have a point, because anyway, their 3D worlds have shrunk to 2D screens. So that's already happened. And then on top of that, if they don't have goals that are larger than themselves, then that's something that adds to that.
So how do
problem.
you make sure that your teenagers were aware of everything outside of themselves?
I just focused on what they enjoyed and what they had talents in. And luckily for me, in both cases, the two seem to correlate. So for the older one, for Akash, it was sport. For my younger one, Arav, it was creative pursuits. And I just encouraged that. And I just encouraged them to enjoy it and encouraged them to spend time with it. And what emerged was theirs to see.
I think you brought up something really important, the idea of the collective. And I think adolescence is the most incredible environment, and I grew up that way too. The collective bringing you that strength, and it's different now. And it's still described as a phase that's fragile and electric. So how do parents now navigate that, keeping in mind this whole collective way that previous generations sort of lived with?
Right. So, Pavi, adolescence is a biological paradox, right? On one hand, you've got teens who are able to, because of their brains are primed for learning. And at the same time, they are vulnerable to reckless choices. I'm sure you've seen this with your teens. They will be able to have extended debates with you on the environment, and yet be prone to reckless driving, right? Or driving too fast, and therefore recklessly. Then the book uses the metaphor of the Ferrari brain to really bring that point home, where we talk about how their amygdala, which is the emotional engine, is revved at full throttle, while their prefrontal cortex, which is that the brakes, are still under construction. So they're in a situation where they can do a lot with their minds, but they're yet vulnerable. And my father brought the point when he read the book. He said it's almost like they're in their toddler years, and how much attention we pay to them in their toddler years. But when they're from 13 to 18, somehow we think that we don't need to pay that kind of attention. But in fact, we do. And that's the point that we're now recognizing because of all this work in neuroscience. And none of this is academic for me, obviously, Pavi, because I have 2 teenage sons. And as I mentioned earlier, I saw one of them enter his teenage years during the pandemic. And we saw him and his classmates go through 2 years of online school. This is not an unusual phenomenon in India. 32 crore Indian students experience social isolation during this time. I mean, to imagine being stuck in front of Zoom for 2 years from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., can you imagine? I can't imagine doing it. But our kids did that. And there are repercussions to that, right? So like all the other parents who had children in school during that time, I was worried about how I could keep my kids motivated, how I could keep them healthy in mind and body. And I think this book came out as a result of that.
I mean, you talked about being a recovering helicopter parent, and specifically given, the backdrop of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to protect. An instinct kind of, makes you want to jump at it. And you're also dealing with a world that has never been before. So, when instinct says protect, but wisdom whispers to step back, and the world around you is strange, how did you navigate that?
Yeah, so I hovered. When the kids were growing up, I used to micromanage their homework and their test assignments. Till one of their teachers very wisely said, she said, he needs to own his mistakes, and that hit home, right? And so I think it's still, I think, like I said, I'm still recovering because the world that we live in, the parents around us are also helicopter parents. But what I do try to do, and my sons agree that I do it, is I listen. I've learned to listen. I give my children my full and complete attention when they're talking, and I let them lead the conversation. And that really works. So you let them lead the conversation, and you ask them at the end of it, do you want my advice? And more often than not, it's a no. And they just really want to talk they just want to be the ones talking, and they want you to be their sounding board, and that's it. And as long as you can do that, it seems to work so far. Yeah.
Rohini, I'm going to take this slightly to a different part of the story. Many celebrate resilience sometimes almost as a badge of honor, but when resilience becomes an identity, it can trap young people in survival mode. Their nervous system constantly staying wired to endure rather than to thrive. So, how do we encourage resilience without turning it into a lifelong label of survivor?
I think the words resilience and survivor are fine for adults to use. I don't think we should ask teenagers to worry about being either survivors or resilient because they have to experiment. If they don't experiment safely at this age, I think they cannot be secure adults. So, resilience is something that we can look back and say, okay, I taught or helped my child to be resilient, but that's not how they are thinking. So, I think we have to look at what's happening with teenagers today and what a stressful environment they are in. I'm going to read excerpts of a survey that we supported done by Youth Ki Awaaz and YLAC because right now I'm sure it's on many people's mind, even here in the audience, because AI has now come into the picture. In addition to everything that you have written, and we want to talk to you more about what you have written, but AI has come into the picture now, and now they have to be resilient in a world where when adults are not there, there is a ready-made companion that you have never seen that's not even real, and that's going to provide you with all the comfort that you're looking for if you know how to navigate it. So let me quickly tell you what this survey found out. None of it is very surprising, but it's still, how they say, mind-opening. It was a small sample size because many of the responses they got, they were very careful to throw away any responses that didn't seem authentic. But 57% of young Indians use AI for emotional support. Now think on that. We think we are parents and grandparents, okay? So remember, we are sharing the stage. 22% female respondents, this surprised me, use AI as a romantic partner. Now try to imagine, I don't know, we're pretty old here. I think the audience age is also quite high. But I don't think you can even imagine what that means. What does that mean? The survey categorized youth in 3 buckets: school students, undergrads and postgrads, and working professionals. That sounds like 4 buckets. Anyway, 88% use AI when feeling anxious. 88% use AI when feeling anxious. 63% share personal secrets with an AI.
It's crazy.
Only 31% report using AI for non-emotional purposes such as studying. So don't believe your teenager when they say, Mama, I had a paper to submit and that's why I was on Chat GPT. Okay, but the thing to understand about parenting and grandparenting, they say they do it because AI is non-judgmental, a huge thing for us to learn. AI is always available and it gives good advice. However, last fact, 67% worry about social isolation, and 58% are worried about privacy. The thing is, this is such a new area. And I want to ask Sujata and even you, Pavitra, because you all are so much younger than me, that how on earth how do you control digital habits of teenagers? Even for 6-year-olds, 5-year-olds, we are finding it hard. How do you get them to listen about limiting time on their screens, to understand that is dangerous? I don't know, so I'm going to throw it back to the two of you,
Yeah.
because there's a lot that can go wrong, though some can go right.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with this?
Yeah.
I'm
It
just
was-
going to add
yeah.
to Rohini's question to you. This reliance that they have on AI as a confidant, as a friend, as a romantic partner,
Yeah.
specifically with teenagers, what does that do given how deeply vulnerable they are?
No, I think this is this is a serious issue on our hands, Rohini. I think your stats exemplified what I learned from conversations that I had with professors at LSR, professors at Ashoka, professors at Flame. They all described situations where their students were using AI for emotional support and using AI as surrogate boyfriends and girlfriends, and particularly when they were going through a breakup. And to me, I mean, they said, we don't know what to do about this. We're seeing this, we don't know how to handle it. And when you asked me that question earlier about how do you handle it, I was talking to teenagers about this while writing the book. And there's this one conversation I had with this teen that was really illuminating. She said, Auntie, we don't get into digital black holes when we are motivated by external goals that we're excited about. And we have offline activities that we enjoy. It goes back to the same stuff.
Common sense, really.
Yes. And the bit about our young people relying on AI for emotional support or AI for their relationships is really concerning, because they're not going to be able to have proper human relationships if this is what they get into. And AI can never replace human relationships. The human relationships are complex.
Well,
require
AI doesn't
empathy.
think so.
They
AI doesn't
require
seem to agree,
compassion.
but yeah.
So yeah, no, but it is deeply worrisome, I think.
I think we, as parents of teenagers, mine is not yet a teenager, but fostering this feeling of collective outdoor activities, sport and music before they can even sort of be drawn into the world that is AI continues to remain extremely crucial, as it was when I assume all of us were growing up, except that AI was not the problem at that point. But I still feel like that's exactly the only way one can navigate it. I have a 7-year-old, and the only way that we do it is sort of exposing him to sport and music early. And I have a wonderful family who also believes in sport and music, and that's the only way. Not by saying don't be on the screen, because no one's going to listen to that, but showing them that there is pleasure in other things that's far more beneficial. And Sujata, I just wanted to understand from you, given that you're a scientist steeped in data, you're a columnist, who's translating research to everyday readers, but more importantly, you are a mother navigating the storm that is teenagehood. Do you find that your roles collide and they clash, and how does that shape your philosophy?
Yeah. So the science of parenting says that teens need to take risks to grow. And as a mother, my instinct says bubble wrap them. Right? So I remember when Akash was in middle school and he would get injured quite a bit when playing cricket. And I remember he came back with a fractured finger. And I went to his coach and asked him in utter sincerity, can't they wear gloves when they field? And his coach said no. And my son was deeply embarrassed because he said, Mama, you can't be asking my coach questions like this. So no, I think, it's that tension, right, that sharpened the book's advice, I hope. And, you have to work with them as they grow older. I think they're raising us as we are raising them. But I have realized that, parenting done right is instinct that's rooted in empathy and hard-earned wisdom. And you hope that by the time, you've sort of hit your 70s, you've gotten better at it. But it's a process for sure.
That's amazing. And taking that further with when your children were teenagers, how did you see, resilience emerge in their lives? And, you work with so many young people, supporting them through their own journeys of fragility and self-discovery. So take us back to that time.
I think, as I said, for me, the school is a very important environment. You have to be able to know that your children are safe and happy and curious in their school. If they can retain curiosity and develop a passion for anything, one subject, one activity in those school years, when they are still in a safe-ish environment, I think it really helps. Now, looking back, and my children are not in the room, and I don't know, did I ask their permission of talking about them? I can't remember. But it's not very personal. But I feel if I had to turn the clock back, Sujata and Pavitra, I'm not sure I would send them abroad for their undergraduate anymore.
Why do you say that?
I think both of them felt very lonely. And I remember conversations with you
Yeah.
yourself. And at that time, India did not have enough places where my ambitious youngsters could go to colleges. And even those good colleges needed 110% marks in order to get into them. So it seemed very risky to wait. And so we sort of gently nudged them into going away. But I think their personalities changed. I think they developed certain traits that I think they would not have if they were here. They also learned to be marvelous analysts and thinkers and writers, all that separately. But that loneliness that they felt, I think, did something to them which perhaps would not have happened if they went to school here, to undergrad, is what I think now. So that poor grandson had not a chance, I think, of going very far away if I'm around. No, I'm
Yeah,
joking.
I
I'm
think that
joking. I don't have
yeah.
that much control. But speaking of control, see, Pavitra, there's a risk if you put me here because I'm a journalist. So
This
I
is
ask the question.
Go for it. Go for it.
No, the question I want to ask you,
Yes.
I know how you parented, and you're just a nice person, poor thing. But
Poor thing.
but most people are not like that, and also most people don't know how to get their children to listen to them. So you've written a marvelous how-to book, and I read it and I said, yes, this is what I'm going to do when I have a teenager. But most teenagers just simply don't. They close doors on you. They don't listen to you, or they take it out from the other ear.
Yeah.
So honestly, tell us now, though, if we are reading this book and have teenagers, either children or grandchildren,
Yes.
what should we do when they say no, or they just don't pay any attention?
They shouldn't feel like you're lecturing them. It has to come. Now you're making me spill my secrets in front of my teenagers.
No, but
The
Sujata, in
teenagers,
your
please leave
book,
the
you
room.
talked a lot
Close
about
your ears.
you talked a lot about presence being so important, and I think
Yeah, so I think that the piece about presence, the piece about really listening is crucial, and perhaps my coach training helps. Perhaps my training as a
Yeah.
coach helps because I've seen how listening compassionately, truly listening, right, hearing what they're saying completely with your full presence can be transformative, and we see this in coaching all the time. It can change people's lives, just listening with compassion and presence. And there's research to prove it. So teenagers who come from listen to homes have 40% less anxiety. So if you can give whatever time you give your teens, I think if you can give it consciously and pay attention to what they're saying, both verbally and non-verbally.
taking from that, this is a question for both of you. I think, and this is just evolutionary, right? Every generation bubble wraps the next one and protects them further and further. And my mother and I were having this conversation because failure, let's talk about failure. It's so important. And, the generations before were thrown into it and failed, built resilience and moved. Now we're bubble wrapping and protecting this generation. So how does one manufacture an environment to kind of, in a way, foster failure and then learning from it? I'd love to hear from both of you.
No, because it's very true that we look after the grandson too much. He's really surrounded by too many loving and caring adults. He has to escape into books to avoid us. Thank God it's books. But we don't, yeah, I don't know what to do about that. He's not safe on my street outside. And I think it's best when you don't live in these elite gated communities and you live in the rough and tumble of India's urban life like we did, I don't know how to recreate that honestly for my grandson. I think the elite classes have to work extra hard to get a social environment for their children.
I agree with you, Rohini. I think for us, it helped that our older one is a professional athlete, so he has had his trials and tribulations because of his passion, his sport. And with our younger son, because he's very creative, he's had avenues of challenge and continues to push himself because that's what he enjoys. I think that I think for us, I think we just hit the lottery with our son. So maybe we lucked out.
That's amazing. You know, people often think of resilience as innate, but you argue that it can be cultivated. So let's talk about things that I know many of us want to hear. Let's talk about food and movement and creativity and sleep, the hidden keystones, so specifically with teenagers.
Right. So resilience then is both the process and the outcome of handling a life challenge successfully. And therefore, what we're talking about is handling or managing our inner and our external resources, right? Our outer and our inner resources. Our inner resources include how we manage our sleep, how we look after our nutrition, and how we manage our movement, our exercise, how we exercise our bodies. The external piece is how do we handle our or how do we creatively use the resources that we have externally, and how do we manage our digital media. And I think for our teenagers, what we need to do is build in habits for all five so that they can grow this muscle of resilience throughout their lifetimes. Make sure that they are getting enough to eat that is nutritious, make sure they're getting adequate sleep, which is key. They don't get enough sleep because our school systems all over the world don't recognize that they tend to go to sleep later and wake up later. They're not being lazy. That's just how teen circadian rhythms work. When they're younger, they can naturally wake up earlier. When they're older, they can naturally wake up earlier. But when they're going through their teen years, they tend to sleep later around 11:30. That's when the melatonin secretion goes up. And they tend to wake up a little later as a consequence. And therefore, schools need to address that. We don't really feel that compassionate for them when they try to catch up on sleep in the weekends and sleep till 1 p.m. We think, what's wrong with them? But they really do need that extra sleep. And then there's a piece about using your digital media responsibly. I think they must learn to do that. It has to be part of their education because it's their world. We didn't grow up with access to phones and access to iPads and to screens the way they do, but this is their world and they must know how to use it responsibly. And the creative piece is critical because they need to know how to engage creatively with the world. They must have creative outlets because they're going to have more downtime than we did, right? They're going to have more leisure time than we did. Do we want them stuck watching Netflix all day or gaming all day? No. We want them to have activities that they enjoy, that they had nurtured through their lives, so that they can maybe paint or they can write or they can garden. All the things that we did as kids with our grandparents. I certainly did that with mine. But then we sort of lost along the way. So we need to get them to reconnect with that for their own humanity and I think their survival long term. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times now, when academics overwhelm, they tend to retreat into binge watching and social media and gaming. And that's seen as escapism, a coping mechanism. But you're saying that it does have a place in the story. It's not something we shun and we dismiss and we, so.
No, I think escapism, and we've experienced all of this as adults, right? When you use Netflix, that one show, or when you are perhaps gaming for that 1 hour, it allows you that break so that your brain can actually reset. It's a great stress reducing method. But the problem that arises is when it becomes something that you're doing for extended periods of time. And the teenage brain, remember, is prone to addiction just because of the way that it's wired, the way that its reward centers are created. So you want to avoid that in your teens, right? You want to make sure that they can enjoy their Netflix, but give them perhaps a way to enjoy it. So let them finish that challenging piece of homework and then they watch that Netflix or do that gaming only on a weekend. Again, all of this becomes a lot easier if they have stuff that they really enjoy doing and are motivated, right? And I think that's the key, finding them things to do that they want to get back to, that is offline.
And I'll come to you for that, Rohini, because your work stresses so much on the power of Samaj as the balancing force. So, how can communities become places where adolescents don't just endure, but kind of heal and thrive together? What can we do?
No, I don't have any experience on that, because the kind of work we support for active citizenship, for example, those people are little older. Some of our youth organizations, which are saying to Samaj and citizens that get involved early and help in solving local problems. Teenagers often like to get involved in things like waste management, save water. They get very excited for short projects, and I think those are good to learn how to become a good citizen later. But I won't say much more than that, because I'm not the expert. But there are things that I think before we close, we should talk about is, see, the adults themselves have to be the role models, because they don't learn from what we say, of course. They only learn from what we do. So you can't look up from your phone and say, put down that device, You just can't do that. And it's very hard for us not to be on devices. And I feel really sad for parents whose work is on digital devices and who have to control the digital addictions that their children might fall into. So I want to go back to you to say, how do you solve for this? It's a very catch-22 kind of thing.
I totally agree with you. And one of the suggestions I make in the book is that of a digital sunset, where the entire family switches their phones off at say 9 p.m. at night and does something else, right? Whether it's reading or playing board games together. Now, my sons, when they were listening to this, said, "Mama, we never do this." And that is true. So the one thing that we do successfully is that we all put our phones outside our bedrooms at night. At least at night, when we're sleeping, the phones are either charged outside or switched off outside. But that does happen.
Actually, it's the grandson that is training us. He suddenly learned how to play a card game called Judgment. So we all sit in the evenings and play it for 15 or 20 minutes. And he says, no phones, no devices. You all have to be present while we play this game. So from the mouth of babes, I think maybe they are going to teach us how to do this.
True.
Yeah, exactly. Rituals. So, but with teenagers, how do you bring these rituals into practice wherein you're communicating, you're listening, you're loving each other, you're bonding? Because I think that's finally the key for strengthening relationships between parents and teens. So, how does one practically do this?
I think just let them talk. Let them talk to you and be the sounding board. They don't want your advice. They don't want to hear you speak. They just want to hear you listen.
And what about the 3-letter word? How do you deal with sex and teenage as a parent today in 2025?
Can I pass that question?
No, you can't. It's the most important thing if you're a teenager.
It is the most
No, I was
important
just
thing.
thinking,
But
like in the long past, I mean, we
Yeah.
know that, say, in tribal societies or in many societies, teenagers are allowed to experiment with intimacy. And it was not frowned upon. And today, everyone's worried about everything. And today, there are new questions of gender fluidity, of gender identity that
Yeah.
we're all worrying about. It's coming a lot from the West, but it's still coming into into India. And these are some of the biggest questions
Yeah.
on the
I
Indian
agree.
parents' mind.
I agree. No, I think, Rohini, what helps us is to use movies as segue.
Movies. Did you say movies?
Movies. So you watch a film and then you talk about it.
Right.
So you don't talk about it directly.
Correct.
You address it tangentially.
Mm.
And then you see what comes out. Because information wise, by middle school, you've given them the information.
Mm.
So I've already had those chats with them through middle school in terms of biology, right? But the emotions and the rest of it, consent and safety, all of those things I think are best addressed, in a calm way, rather than going at it directly, because they're not going to like that. They're not going to ask, want you to lecture them on it. So if you can have a conversation through a movie or an incident, right?
So
see what comes out of it.
Would you say that families should take the opportunity as it comes?
Yeah.
not avoid it, but take an opportunity to talk about this.
Or maybe
At what, 13,
plant-
14, 15? Which is the right
certainly
teen?
by 13. But
By 13.
yeah, or plan it. I mean, choose a movie that you think would elicit a conversation
I
that
think
is
also-
useful to them.
Sorry to cut you off. I think also historically as a nation, we tend to view desire with a lens of shame, and that kind of is carried on. So I think if we, take that step to remove that lens and take desire for what it truly is, because it's such an important part of who
Yes.
each one of us is. And I think that could potentially change the conversation. Then we're not talking about desiring someone in quiet corners of rooms, but it's an open conversation.
Because
sure.
as you say in your book, and you've described the biochemistry of adolescence so well, and in fact in your book you've tackled all these issues, and you talk about access to pornography, for instance.
Yeah.
Today, I mean, it's mind-blowingly scary how easy it is for teenagers to access really bad pornography. So what parents must be petrified about these things. What is your advice? In the book you have given some good advice. So do you want to tell the audience? From
I'd
your
like
book,
you
from
to
your
read the book.
Also, we're coming towards the end, but talking about resilience being the hidden key to success, I want to know from both of you, how and when does it sort of ripple forward, present itself in academic achievement, relationships, but most importantly, in the making of a meaningful life, because that's really what we're all here for. So, can you just kind of talk us through that?
To me, resilience is about being able to move forward from failure. And human beings are very fallible, and we are going to fail all the time. To be able to say, I failed, see it squarely in the face, decide whether it's a moral failure or just, something that you tripped up and can get up on. If we can show that we are doing it, the teenagers will do it. So, resilience means being able to move on from failure without being crushed under it. She's written, and it's true, we're the suicide capital of the world. And that's because you think that failure once drags you down, I cannot come out. That we must be very careful of. And I think if we can encourage curiosity and, a kind of commitment to something that you're passionate about, I think these things give you the resilience in your adulthood to face anything that comes. Because the world that's in the future is going to be even more different than anything we've seen ever. And that's the great, joyful opportunity and responsibility for the parents of teenagers today to allow them to come into that future with love. They need to feel loved and they need to feel listened to. So you're very, very quite right on that.
Thank you, Rohini. Thank you. I think we have a friend here who had introduced me to the growth mindset by Carol Dweck. Kavita, I can't see you, but I know you're here somewhere. And I do believe that resilience will ripple outward into achievement and into relationships when the mind rests in the growth mindset. When the mind has the belief firmly that we can grow and learn from our mistakes, right? This whole issue about us being the suicide capital is because our children are under the belief that they can't change, that they can't grow from their mistakes, they can't bounce back. And the moment they know that they can, the moment they realize that there is a difference in the situation between saying I've failed and I've learned, then they're in a position to really grow from their mistakes and leverage those setbacks so that they know that that C minus or C or whatever grade they've got is an avenue, an opportunity to learn time management skills, better study skills, work harder. And I think that's really the key. That's how teens can become resilient in this context.
Okay. No, I know that the audience has questions. So this conversation has been illuminating, thoughtful, urgent, and I'm going to train for the teenagers. So I'll be coming to both of you for advice. But as we close, would you read a short passage from your book that captures the beauty and the paradox of today's teens, their fragility, their fire, and their astonishing capacity for resilience?
As she finds the page, I do want to say something I forgot. Listen, life is absurd, okay? And I think parents need to keep their sense of humor at all times. And if we don't do
that's
that,
an important
because teenagers, I tell you, love the absurd. And they really, like, they'll say the strangest things like, what if you could cut up our family dog and look inside? Now, don't panic when they say that. They're not going to do it. They love the absurd. And if adults can't understand how to retain that sense of the absurd, then you may not be able to successfully parent a teenager.
I love that.
Thank you, Rohini. I'm so glad you're here on stage. Really. To witness teen resilience is to stand before a living masterpiece, one where the cracks are gilded with the gold of hard-won wisdom, where every scar tells the story of a self still choosing to bloom. They are the most breathtaking argument for hope this world has, not because they're unbreakable, but because they keep finding new ways to shine through the broken places. Here lies the secret adults so often forget. Teens don't need to be fixed or turned into drones. They need to be seen in their glorious, messy becoming and reminded your light is not despite the cracks, but because of them. No one is perfect, no system is flawless. But if we sacrifice our children's joy, their curiosity, their very humanity at the altar of achievement, what have we truly gained? Perhaps these words belong nowhere, or perhaps they are the quiet heartbeat of this book, a reminder that education without breath is just another kind of suffocation. Good luck growing resilience in your beloved teen. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
That's so beautiful. That's such a beautiful passage.
So I'd like to end this discussion as far as my talking nonstop is concerned with this short fable. Every morning in a kitchen glowing with early light, a father would take his erasable marker. On the great white walls of tiles, he wouldn't write, he would draw. With careful strokes, he sketched a graceful gateway, and at its center, he placed a lock, shaped not from iron, but from a math equation. Her mother would say, "Beyond this gate lies a secret garden. They say its flowers are spun from candy floss that hums melodies, and its fountains flow with liquid sunlight. But the path belongs only to those who can open the lock." The little girl would sit before the drawn gate, her small face earnest with thought. Some mornings the lock would turn with a quiet click of understanding, and the gate would swing open in her mind, revealing the wonders that lingered long after the marker was erased. Other mornings, the lock held fast, resisting all her efforts. Her parents never gave her the key, but they watched, full of quiet pride and unwavering belief. They were never cross when she struggled, only if she didn't try at all. To them, the attempt was everything, a sacred act of courage. With each passing day, each puzzle faced, she grew not only wiser but braver. She came to understand that the locked gate wasn't a barrier, it was an invitation, a promise that beauty and clarity lay just beyond, waiting for her persistence. She learned to face locked doors without fear, for she had become the master locksmith of her own mind. That little girl was me, the wall was our kitchen wall, and the two wisest guides who showed me that resilience is the master key that unlocks every gate are my parents. And tonight they're here in the room. Baba, I don't know if you remember the math equations that you would write on the kitchen walls in Asia House for me daily. And through them, you gently taught me to persevere. And Ma, I don't know if you remember, but you encouraged me to finish them. This book and every word within it grew from the seeds of resilience that you both planted. Thank you.
That's so beautiful.
And two more thoughts for the audience. One, that resilience isn't about being unbreakable. It's about having the heart of a lion, the courage to face big feelings, to fail and to try again. And it's that lion-hearted spirit that carries us through. And second, I think the point that Rohini and Pavi both made is that resilience isn't caught, it's taught. Teens absorb it from their parents who model grit, grace, and the courage to ask for help. Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata. You've really done something so beautiful and important with this book.
You have been listening to BIC Talks by Bangalore International Centre. If you liked what you heard, do follow us on social media. Keep up with our programming by signing up for our mailer on the website or leave us a review on Apple Podcast or iTunes. The crew that makes these podcasts possible is S. Sarvana Raj and Ranjit Kumar on sound supervision and production. Artwork is designed by Chandani Venkataraman of Crisscross Design Studio. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on your favorite podcast platform. It can also be accessed on our website, bangaloreinternationalcentre.org. This is Sunaina Jain signing off on behalf of everyone at BIC.